Welcome back, strangers. It's hard to imagine that a little over 50 years ago, the United States and Soviet Union were at the height of the space race, sending up satellites, astronauts, and putting men on the moon. But at what cost? Today, we're going to discuss the lost cosmonaut conspiracy theory. On April 12, 1961, the Soviet Union successfully launched cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin into orbit, making him the first official man in space. 4 years earlier, the Soviet Union also launched Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite in space. The Soviet Union was dominating the United States in the space race, causing U.S. President John F. Kennedy to make the proclamation in 1962 that the United States would go to the moon before the end of the decade. Many believe that the Soviets' domination came after a series of fatalities and mission disasters. The Soviet Union was known not to publish their failures, and even attempted to cover up launch disasters, leaving some to question whether Yuri Gagarin was even truly the first man in space, or whether he was the first cosmonaut to survive the mission. The rumors of cosmonaut deaths and failed space flights began in December 1959, when a high-ranking Czech communist leaked information that 3 cosmonauts died in a converted R-5A rocket test. 5 other cosmonauts were reportedly killed during different manned suborbital flights between 1958 and 1959. None of these deaths have been officially confirmed. The rumors continued to grow with deaths of multiple high-altitude parachutists, including the renowned Colonel Peter Dolgov, who died testing high-altitude safety equipment, which was falsely reported on a failed space mission. During the 1960s, the Giudica Cordiglia brothers were 2 amateur Italian radio operators who came forward with audio recordings of radio transmissions from failed manned Soviet space flights. The 2 built a radio monitoring station in an old German bunker using scavenged equipment in Italy. They claimed to have the largest private collection of space mission recordings after years of monitoring and recording early Soviet and American missions. In their archive, they found 9 instances of secret Soviet space missions that resulted in catastrophic failure or crew fatalities. A few of the brothers' recordings did occur during the time of the rumored secret Soviet missions. In 1960, the brothers intercepted an SOS Morse code distress signal from a cosmonaut orbiting Earth. NASA later confirmed the discovery of a Soviet orbital capsule that they said was unmanned and left over from earlier test missions. In April of 1961, days prior to Yuri Gagarin's famous spaceflight, another manned space capsule was recorded orbiting the Earth 3 times before entering the Earth's atmosphere by the brothers. This coincides with the rumored flight of Vladimir Ilyushin, who some claim was the first successful man in space. However, his craft failed to maintain proper orbit, causing him to land in the People's Republic of China, where he was imprisoned for a year. By the time he was released, the Soviets had already declared Yuri Gagarin as the first man in space. Another strange incident occurred 3 weeks before Yuri Gagarin's successful mission. An ejector seat parachuted from a space capsule above the Soviet countryside, March 25, 1961. The villagers in the area were in awe at the discovery of what they thought was a dead cosmonaut after they had witnessed the space capsule re-entry overhead. The Soviet Union dismissed the body as their test dummy known as Ivan Ivanich, a dummy that was sent on multiple missions in space, with some even including human voice recordings to test radio systems before Gagarin's spaceflight. Some of the more disturbing recordings the brothers have in their archive include what they believe is the radio transmission of a cosmonaut suffocating to death. Another is evidence of a manned spaceflight stuck drifting in deep space after the pilot lost control of the craft. The creepiest is the recording of a female cosmonaut saying, "I am hot," as she burns up during re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Despite the recordings lining up with other rumors and evidence of failed space missions, many experts are quick to discredit the brothers' archive as an elaborate hoax. Many recordings fail to use the proper Soviet Air Force terminology used by cosmonauts during missions and training. The recordings also contain numerous grammatical errors and disjointed sentences that do not appear to be spoken by highly educated cosmonauts whose native language was Russian. Radio experts say there was no way possible that the amateur brothers could have recorded unique signals with their improvised radio network. The brothers' archive contains transmissions that no other government in the world have, despite numerous countries possessing massive radio networks much more capable of intercepting radio signals from space. The recording of the woman cosmonaut burning up has an Italian accent, leading many to think it's the brother's sister in the recording. The brother's story was picked up by an international radio station, allowing them to profit off their story and supposed archives of the recordings. In 1967, the Soviet Union had an embarrassing disaster on a global stage when the Soyuz 1 parachute failed to properly open after re-entering the atmosphere, killing cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov. He became the first official flight fatality, but was he really the first? Reportedly, Komarov knew the space capsule was unsafe to fly, but did not want the mission to be delayed or scrubbed and flew it anyway. How many of these unsafe flights took place? In 1969, the Soviet Union continued to face global shame as the United States Apollo 11 successfully put men on the moon. Some claim that the Soviet Union attempted to beat the Americans to the moon with their new N-1 rocket on July 3, 1969. However, it exploded. Another rumor is that the second Soviet space crew attempted to reach the moon before the Americans, but failed to achieve lunar orbit and overshot the moon. The Soviets officially claim all of their lunar test missions were either unmanned test flights or space probes. The Soviets officially ended its moon landing program in 1974. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, there have been numerous official leaks of their space program and secret failures. However, none of these leaks have officially confirmed the lost cosmonaut conspiracy. Today, the Russian government denies any knowledge of secret cosmonaut fatalities. What do you think, strangers? Do you think any of these incidences resulted in the secret death of Soviet cosmonauts? What about the brothers' radio recordings? Do you agree they were a hoax or evidence of a cover-up spanning over 50 years and multiple government and space agencies? Thanks, strangers, for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like. Let us know your theories on the lost cosmonauts in the comments. Also, please subscribe and be sure to smash that bell button so you never miss one of our videos. It helps us out a lot. And as always, stay strange.
The idea of phantom cosmonauts who flew before Yuri Gagarin but died in space so their deaths were covered up by the Soviet Union, is such a fascinating idea. Unfortunately, they're not real, but the story of how we came to think they're real is pretty compelling in itself. The idea of phantom cosmonauts comes from the very real mystery surrounding the early Soviet space program. In the 1960s, missions weren't announced until they were literally leaving the Earth, and if a mission failed, it would be given a different designation to hide the fact that it was part of an actual program. Reports that reached the West were often missing details or were misinterpreted, so no one really knew the true story. This all led to a list of names that appeared in the late 1950s. And no one could confirm whether these were cosmonauts who were training to fly or cosmonauts who had already died in space. And thus the mysteries began. In 1958, reports reached the United States that a Soviet pilot had flown on a suborbital flight to 186 miles, which definitely qualifies as spaceflight. The report turned out to be false. It was part of a radio broadcast, much like the Orson Welles broadcast of War of the Worlds. It just confused people and made people believe that the story was real when it wasn't. But there was some truth to the story. It turned out that a Soviet pilot had actually flown a suborbital mission. But remember that a suborbital mission could be like an X-15 flight, just releasing, going up, and then coming back down. But validity to this story came from some pretty trustworthy sources, specifically Herman Oberth, who said that he had heard the true story of a Soviet pilot on a suborbital flight, didn't say what kind of vehicle it was in, who had been killed on the mission. So this opened up the idea that this was the Soviet Union's first cosmonaut flight that had failed miserably and they were covering up his death. Stories took off in 1959 when America met its Mercury astronauts and started looking for evidence of an equivalent program in the Soviet Union. Details were far and few between, many coming from unreliable sources, but gradually the West learned that the Soviet Union was training a class of cosmonauts. However, they didn't really know who they were or what they were doing or where they were. Nevertheless, a sketchy picture emerged of a Soviet space program with 3 World War II veterans training as cosmonauts. They were named Belakonev, Kachur, and Grashev. A 4th cosmonaut, whose name was never known, was rumored to have been killed in a training accident. that lost cosmonaut reappeared in the months that followed. A weekly Russian magazine showed an image of doctors, technicians, and subjects all working on a life support system. There were 3 men in the image, the real Belakonev, Kachura, and Grashev, but the absence of a 4th seemed to solidify the existence of a dead man. Western reports assumed that the image showed real training facilities and that the men were real cosmonaut trainees, which added more validity to the stories. The rumors got another boost in 1961. On February 4th, the Soviets announced the imminent launch of a 7-ton Sputnik. Western specialists listened to the launch and heard what sounded like moaning coming from the spacecraft, the signal of a human heartbeat, and Russian translated through Morse code. It all sounded like the man was dying, and right at the moment when staging should have occurred on the launch, the heartbeat stopped and the transmission ended. Was it a lost cosmonaut, or was it suspicious that that transmission was done on a frequency that was very easily accessible to amateur radio operators? It could have been a trick, or it could have been a test of a system. Nevertheless, it fueled this idea of lost cosmonauts that were being covered up by the Soviet Union. More Phantom launches followed. On April 9th, the day before Gagarin was originally scheduled to fly, the British communist newspaper The Daily Worker reported that Lieutenant Colonel Vladimir Sergeyevich Ilyushin had launched into orbit on April 7th or 8th, circled the Earth 3 times, but then his spacecraft malfunctioned. Some technical mishap had brought him back from space deranged. He was now unfit to show the world and was hidden, and his accomplishments swept under the rug. He wasn't. There was a real Ilyushin, but he was a pilot who never joined the cosmonaut training program. Another strange rumor emerged from within the Soviet space program itself. A severely burned man was brought to the care of Dr. Vladimir Golyakovsky in March of 1961 under the name of Sergeyev Ivanov. He was thought to be maybe a killed cosmonaut, and he was, sort of. The man was actually Valentin Bondarenko, who had been killed when a fire broke out in a pure oxygen environment during a test. As though to add more fuel to the fire of rumors, Bondarenko's death was hushed up. In the 1970s, images of the Soviet space program from just a decade earlier started to emerge that only fueled the rumors more, because they were all strangely doctored. They were images showing cosmonauts either in training or on vacation, and in some images, men seemed to be missing. They were not phantom cosmonauts. They were not men who had died in space and so had to be removed from the history books. Instead, they were cosmonaut trainees who didn't behave well. They had bad reputations and were deemed poor role models for kids growing up, that their likenesses were removed from images. The only reason we know that these images have been doctored was because mission and program managers didn't remember which version of the images had been released, the original or the one with this guy taken out, the one with that guy taken out, and eventually historians got really interested and started putting together all the images to figure out who had been taken out when and why. If you like this video, guys, please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you want vintage space between videos, be sure to follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.